As you can see by the title of my sermon, If Not Jesus, Then Who or What, it's really a continuation of what has been said along the lines of a little bit of the evangelism, but hopefully an encouragement. I really want to strip this back and bring it back to the basics of what I feel this message. It's probably a repetitive message. I feel like I've done this before. I feel that many people do this message, but I think it's incredibly important that we are not getting distracted. So, if it's not Jesus, then who or what, and where are your eyes? There's a bit of a subtitle there. I'm going to launch in. I'm going to be reading through the story. There's actually sort of a story, but within that story it's a couple of little stories, and I want to be hitting in on some of them, of all of them actually. This is taken from Mark chapter 5. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realised that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding around you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which meant, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this they were completely astonished. Not back there. I want to take us back to this part. As I was reading this, there's a story within a story. And I think it's important we actually acknowledge this, instead of just reading, "Oh yes, here's a miracle and here's another miracle," and then we just move on. And actually hit in on the two miracles that we see here. First of all, we've got one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus. So this is not a Christian who's been following Jesus around and claiming to be a Christian and I'm a follower of the way or whatever. He is actually a synagogue leader. So there's a sense of responsibility within the Jewish community. So we have here a man who is desperate on behalf of his daughter. So desperate that he is prepared in a public environment come and see or send his people on to speak to Jesus. That is not something that I imagine a decision is taken lightly, but possibly the desperation of your daughter dying makes you do anything. And I can understand that part. But in doing so, he clearly didn't give a lot of thought to the ramifications of, as a synagogue leader, approaching Jesus in such a desperate fashion in a public environment. He didn't call Jesus aside quietly. He didn't just send a quiet messenger and just say, hey, distract Jesus and, have a little whisper in his ear. This was done in front of others. But he was so desperate. And he just knew that if he could just speak to Jesus, his daughter would be healed. Such faith. Such desperation, but such faith. Then we get to a little story within that. As he's walking along, he's going to go, and there's a large crowd. So again, we're not talking about just 3 or 4 people saw this and the rumours will spread, but a large crowd. A large crowd would have heard Jairus speak in a clear, loud voice, come and help my daughter. I know she will be healed if you put your hands on her. But then in front of this large crowd, we have a woman. Now, it's very clear across all literature that women were not first-class citizens generally, firstly. If the woman was bleeding, then you're definitely not meant to be in a public environment. When you have been subjected to bleeding for 12 years, that is a pretty massive toll. 12 years of being an outcast. 12 years of spending your hard-earned money or somebody's money to try and get to the bottom of this and still not healed. If anything, you're worse. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. What sort of hope and desperation would have been there for her? What sense of loneliness, that outcast feel? I can only imagine to that extent. But both this woman and Jairus saw Jesus and had their eyes on him and knew he was going to be the answer to what they needed, to their desperate situation and plight. In amongst the crowd, she comes up behind him and touches his cloak, thinking, if I just touch his cloak, I will be healed. Just like Jairus, who was in a position of leadership, had the same attitude, if he just touches my daughter, she will be healed. This woman who's an outcast, who would be considered at the other end of the societal spectrum, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. We go on to read, and I'm going to move on to that, but in amongst this Roman synagogue leader and the outcast woman who's been bleeding for 12 years, Jesus is their saviour and is what they had their eyes on him for. He had the power over the uncleanliness, demons, and death, and in doing so, making them whole. This is what Jairus and the woman are thinking. If I can just get him near me, touch his clothing, I will be made whole. So we go on to read how she steps forward, and immediately she is freed from her suffering. She would have felt that. She would have felt that immediately. If you are bleeding profusely over all that time and then suddenly it stops, you would know, you would feel immediately that that you were healed. But Jesus felt this, and in amongst back to this large crowd who touched my clothes. How easy would it be for her to just sort of quietly withdraw, end up to be at the back or off to the side, and also do the turning? I don't know if you've ever been in situations, or maybe this is a bit of a parenting tip, maybe it's not a good one, is that if your kids are stuffing around and someone says, whose kids are they? And you all sort of look around as if, I don't know, whose children are they? It didn't really work for us, can I just say. Some of my kids looked too much like me at the time, and so there was no escaping. But my children, of course, are beautiful. But it is that sense of, if you do hear someone say, whose children are those? And it can be highly embarrassing and shameful to be called out on it. But here somebody says, who touched my clothing? It's not somebody, it's actually Jesus. The disciples obviously didn't see it, didn't feel it, didn't know it. But he kept looking. Jesus kept looking. Because it wasn't just he was going off to help heal Jairus' daughter. It wasn't just he felt power leave from here. He actually chose to stop and acknowledge that woman and encourage her to step forward and say, it was me. The woman knew, obviously, that she was the one and knew that she couldn't escape. But she fell at his feet in front of this large crowd. Now, without necessarily saying, all Jesus said at this point was, the power has gone from me. So everyone who was there is thinking, what power, what for? And then when this woman falls at his feet, I reckon there'd be people there who would know, oh my goodness, what are you doing here? You should be over there. You should be outcast. You shouldn't even be here with us. You are contagious. You are just, what are you doing here? But that would have been their first thought. And possibly drawing back from her, because for whatever reason, if you're an outcast and you're put out to one side, I don't know if people think, well, golly, if I touch her, it's going to happen to me. But I think possibly part of the spiritual world at the time, you're going to think, well, she's demonised, I'm going to get it too. I don't know. But I reckon everyone's thoughts would have been, oh my goodness, she's the woman. What is she doing here? I haven't seen her for a long time. I've usually seen her over there. But here she is falling at Jesus' feet. She told him in front of this large crowd what had happened. There's her testimony. I did this, and this is what's happened. Now, she's not preaching. She hasn't pulled up the modern day microphone at the time and preaching. She's just at Jesus' feet, literally saying, this is what my life has been like, and this is what I've just done, and now I am fully healed. I am fully whole. That would be her story. Everyone is listening in. What an amazing story to be hearing. And in doing so, he actually then acknowledged daughter. Now, for him to call her daughter, not just woman or just, who are you, and yeah, whatever, he brushed her off. He actually acknowledged her. And I reckon after 12 years of being outcast, that would have just been heaven on a stick. I can't think of a better, more theological term for it. But when you've had no one talking to you except to maybe leave food or leave whatever, but then run away quickly, and now you've got Jesus saying, daughter, and actually looking her in the eye, no doubt. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. That's a pretty amazing little story in itself. While Jesus was still speaking, though, people are coming out because, remember, he was actually on his way somewhere and he's paused. He's actually heard someone is dying, and I fully believe his heart would be broken over that and wanting to go there. It's not like, I haven't got time in my diary, I'll get there, I've just got to do the shopping first or whatever. He was actually on his way, but he paused to then deal with this woman. A sense of urgency about Jairus' daughter. And at one level, many people may have thought, why have you even bothered to stop for this outcast woman? You've got somebody more important. You've got the daughter of the synagogue leader that needs attending to. So don't worry about her. You've got to go here. This should be your priority. But he paused. In the face of what he should have been doing, what society tells him and everyone to do, he stopped to acknowledge this woman, this outcast woman. But somebody comes out and says, don't worry about it, the daughter's died, why bother him anymore? So, clearly many people thought, oh, just go back to what you were doing. And because, I wonder what the thoughts would have been, because you dealt with this outcast woman who really we haven't seen for 12 years, and she's been bleeding and clearly there's an issue, but we don't want to know about it. But you've actually let the daughter of a synagogue leader die. Shame on you. Jesus being Jesus just thinks, yeah, whatever. Don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him in except for a few select people, which I think is really lovely, in acknowledging possibly the privacy of the girl, the privacy of the family. Everyone's getting upset. He's passing out the tissues but keeps going, no, it's fine. Why all this commotion and wailing? This child is not dead but asleep. But they laughed at him. This story is told in Matthew and Luke as well, and all three of the Gospels. So we'll say something along the lines of everybody laughed at him. When Jesus makes this statement that the daughter is asleep or she's not dead, people laughed. I find that an interesting response. Because I don't know, I possibly wouldn't have been putting up my hand and say, hey, pick me. Yes, I believe you full on Jesus, I'm with you. But to hear that someone has died and then for someone to say she's asleep, I'm not sure my response would have been laughing. So I have to say I don't understand why they'd be laughing, but they clearly in laughing did not believe what he was going to do or what he was saying. Like, who is this Jesus man? Which is really quite bizarre because he's actually just healed somebody from bleeding for 12 years. And then a period of time later, and we're not talking days, I don't know, half an hour, I don't know how far the house was, the synagogue leader's house was from where he had been, but they'd just seen a miracle. And so when Jesus says she's not dead, she's asleep, why was there not an element of, oh, okay, let's watch this space? Anyway, we can only imagine. He brought them all out of the house, and the child's parents were there, and the disciples who he'd chosen, and he took her by the hand and said, get up, girl, little girl, I say to you, get up. And she stood up and began to walk around. Interesting. I don't know what the parallels here, and I'm not suggesting we go down rabbit holes, because I'm actually wanting us to not go down rabbit holes at all about anything. I'm wanting us to focus on Jesus. I'm wanting us to understand fully, which I don't think we ever will, but to keep pressing in. Why did God allow his one and only Son to go to the cross? For us, for me, for you. But it's an interesting note that that woman had been bleeding for 12 years and the little girl was 12 years old. If you are going to research that, just have a little research for interest's sake, but please come back to keep the main thing the main thing. So we have in this story Jairus. We obviously have the daughter, but I want us to focus on Jairus, the father. He had the faith. He went against what he should have been saying and doing to look to Jesus to say, you can heal my daughter. Desperation put him there. But I wonder also if he'd been quietly thinking and watching from afar, who is this guy? What's he been doing? He's been listening to the people coming to the synagogue whinge and complain about maybe Jesus or his followers and how weird and wacky they are, or golly, he's hanging out with the tax collectors and he's hanging out with the lower society people. Pharisaical responses as to, is he abiding by the law of the land? But Jairus would have known all that, but in desperation, he said, Jesus, you're the man. Come and fix my child. I know you can do this. He had such faith. He didn't just ask, can you come and try? He actually had faith. You just need to come and touch her and she will be healed. Then we have the woman who, again, out of desperation, and that is desperation that society had actually put on her. It doesn't say who she was, what she did, what was her job, what was her family life like. But for whatever reason, she was bleeding. She was sick for so long that because of that, she was outcast. So she could well have had a lovely family and lived in a palatial place and had a holiday house somewhere else, if that's what they did in the day. I probably didn't. But she could have had lots. Society may have looked at her and think, wow, you are so blessed, you're so lucky, you've got, the husband, the kids, the nice house, the holiday place, a good job, the money coming in. But because she was sick, through no doubt no work of her own, it was not she made bad choices. We don't know much about that, but we do know that she was bleeding, and because of that only, she is outcast. She's pushed aside. You are on the outer edge of society, and when you get better, then feel free to re-enter society. 12 years is a long time to be ill, and especially when you're paying money and more money, and there is just no positive change. If anything, you're getting worse. It would be so easy for her to probably just curl up and think, I've spent all my money, I have no money, or I've spent enough money, I'm not getting better, what is the purpose? But she was so desperate that she just thought by touching his cloak. It wasn't even, I'm so desperate, can I just have a word with you? Can I have a conversation? Can I get you to just pray for me? It was all I need to do is touch his outfit, touch his robe as he's going down the road. That's where her faith took her, and she was healed. So the touching, both Jesus touching the daughter and her touching his cloak, brought healing, which also brought full restoration to fullness of life for both of these people, the woman and the girl. Everyone else around them was full of scepticism. They laughed. They said, the girl died, don't bother coming back. No doubt they looked at this woman when she first said, hey, it was me, and they thought, oh my goodness, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. Probably the first thoughts would have been anger and frustration and, oh my goodness, you're full of germs, and wonder if everyone just quietly stepped back. But Jesus saw both of these people. And can I just point out, they were both female. So Jesus sees women. Jesus sees female equally like males. And I think for those of us who feel like maybe we've been shafted a little, or God doesn't listen to us, or we've grown up in environments where society, the institution, people have said, you're not capable of that based on your gender, I just want to point that Jesus saw. What did Jesus do? Because we need to have our eyes on Jesus, not what other people say or tell. And Jesus said that, and it's in the Bible. That's just a little aside. Possibly a little Sarah rant, little aside. But Jesus' response to them, I think I've covered that one already. Jesus actually did what was asked of him. Jairus, can you come and see my daughter? He was off. Jesus didn't say, no, not today, never. He started to move. When the woman touched his cloak, he stopped immediately and acknowledged her. And then, once he had blessed her, he then kept going and dealt with the daughter. Can I say all of this was done in full of love, care, peace, grace, joy, blessing, fullness of restoration of health. There was no anger, no negativity, no words of no, other than, no, she's not dead. She's asleep. Jesus is not a God of negativity. God is not a God of saying, no, no, no. He's a God of yes, come to me. Yes, I will bless you. Yes, I will love you. Jesus, God, Holy Spirit, of that three, the Trinity, they do not, if you're getting words of God told me to do something that doesn't seem right or seems negative, God doesn't say to you, wow, that was pretty disgusting, that was pretty awful, wow, that wasn't your finest hour. God says, come to me and I will restore you. Come to me and I will love on you. Come to me and I will restore you. I will restore the situation, the breakdown in family, you've lost your job, the finances look shocking, the health report is not good. God says, come to me and I will love on you and I've got a plan for you. I've got two little stories I want to share with you to highlight my ultimate point of keeping your eyes on Jesus. I've gone for my driver's licence 6 times, 1 for me and 5 times with my children. I was the main teacher of the kids for the learning, and that was, mother-child bonding times. Pretty good actually, overall. But when my kids were going through learning, they also, as part of the getting your Ps, you had to be having some lessons with a professional driving instructor, which I think is a fantastic idea, can I say. And I remember being in the car. I had been teaching one of my kids in particular. We'd been driving and we were living in an area that was pretty flat, back streets, but had lots of roundabouts. The roundabouts probably didn't really matter for what I'm about to say, but that sense of, especially if you're turning left, and for whatever reason, my child would sort of go really, left, but go over the middle line of this road here, and then obviously bring it back. And all I could say was, keep turning the wheel, turn the wheel, and they'd be saying, I am. But somehow we were just still going over that white line and then coming back. And I happened to be, I can't remember if I was in the car with the learning instructor at the same time or we were just chatting. But his word of advice was that, the child was sort of taking the corner too wide, especially turning left. But his advice was, you've got to have your eyes on where you're going. Not just literally as I turn the corner, but your eyes need to be up a bit. For as I turn the corner, I'm actually sort of looking down the road already, not just at the front part of the bonnet of my car. And it was amazing. That piece of advice for the child at the time, which I of course then gave on to the rest of the kids, so hopefully the learning instructor didn't have to do that much afterwards, but it was amazing how keep your eyes up for where you're going down the road, and that would actually somehow help them. I don't fully comprehend why, but somehow in knowing that, this child could then do that corner a lot more snugly than going over the white line and into... We never had oncoming traffic, and no child, no car, no one was injured, can I just say. But this piece of advice was remarkable. We have to keep our eyes on the road that God has for us. And I just keep thinking we've got to look up. When we look down, when life gets us down and we hear a bit of bad news and then we're reading something and then we're hearing something and then something's not going well and whatever, our eyes tend to drop. We've got to lift our eyes. And quite often, if it's family related or it's a close friend or it's something like that related, our eyes tend to turn to that sick family member or that troubled colleague at work. And as you take your eyes off Jesus and down, as you take your eyes to that person, your eyes are coming off Jesus. So we get sucked into that vortex of their troubles and their sadness or illness or the bad medical report or the catastrophic news. We have to keep our eyes on Jesus. And it seems quite bizarre that if we're looking at Jesus and we're actually ignoring the family or the situations, we're not. It's actually quite amazing. I remember when I first was becoming a Christian and my family were not, and that sense you've got to honour your mum and dad, and which is great advice. But it was, I would think, well, how does life work out? How do my family come to know God? If I'm sort of got my eyes on Jesus, it's almost like I've got to ignore my family and ignore my friends. And we read some stories in the Bible where people are called to forsake their family, and we hear stories, people forsaking their family to go somewhere else and do whatever, some wild and amazing something, and it seems pretty bizarre. But God doesn't actually, somehow by keeping our eyes on God and doing what we feel called to do, somehow the family or the restoration or whatever we have forsaken actually comes back to us with blessings. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Just another little example as I'm finishing up. Worship team, you can make your way up if you'd like now. One last little story is I call it people watching. Some people might think it's stalking, but no, it's people watching. I like to just have a cuppa or coffee and just watch people about the place and just see who they are and watch what they're doing and I get joyful when I see family stuff happening or people laughing or having a good time. And sometimes Gary and I, or maybe more so I, will make up little stories about people who are sitting near us and come up with some wild and wacky things. Which will remain just between Gary and myself, obviously, not with the others I see. But you often see parents walking down, or grandparents maybe, and they're holding hands with maybe a 2 or a 3-year-old. Now, if you've ever done this or watched it, the child is hanging on to the adult. So the adult is obviously walking wherever and walking down, say, the halls of Marion or through the shops or down the path near cars. And one of the reasons that you've got to hang on to your child is because their eyes are not as to where they're going. Their eyes are everywhere. And it's you'll see the adult walking forward and you'll see the kids sort of not being dragged, but they're walking, but their eyes are all over the place like this sort of thing. And you've got to keep the child walking. You've got to keep the child walking because you're keeping them safe. So another visual image, if this helps hopefully, is that Jesus, you've got to turn to Jesus to be holding your hand. And while you're getting distracted by what's happening around, good, bad, indifferent, be it wondering why 12 comes up twice in that story, keep holding on to God, keep walking with Jesus, and He will guide you on the path He has for you. He will also prevent you from going down rabbit holes as to what's happening around you and picking up elements that maybe a small group of people think about or you see stuff on the media, and we've all got to rush out, and back in COVID days you've got to stay at home and stock up on toilet paper. And I remember back when we were going to go into the year 2000 and people thought the world was going to go to hell in a handbasket when our computers changed because our computers wouldn't be able to keep up with the Y2K bug. So people were filling up their bathtubs with baked beans and all this sort of thing. And preparing to live life by themselves, it obviously didn't happen. Okay, there's so many things that are out there that can distract us and predictions of where life is going, what the world is going to happen to the world. We have to keep our eyes on God, even more so than before. We have to walk like that child, hanging on to Jesus. And we can walk around and look and see, but not get distracted. And when we do, we just don't let go of Jesus' hand, because He will keep you on the straight and narrow. And if you don't have Jesus, then who or what do you have in your life? Who are you relying upon? What are you relying upon to get you through tomorrow and the next day and years to come? None of us know the time or the day. None of us know what the world will be like in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. But we do know the constant, the one and only constant, is Jesus, hanging on to you, walking with Him. And who knows what the world will be like, but we know we have Jesus. Can I encourage you to get back to the KISS method of life? Keep it simple, stupid. Fish in your own pond. Evangelise where you are. Evangelise in any shape or way you can. It could be just presenting meals to your neighbours. It could be sharing. On Sunday I went to church. What did you do on the weekend? It could be getting out to Glenelg and preaching to randoms as they're walking on by. Bring it on. If that's what your giftings are, go hard. But if that just makes you want to hide under the doona, then no pressure, no judgment. Evangelise the way your character, your personality calls you to do so. Fish in your own pond. Share, chat, whatever with your colleagues, with the parents at the school gate, through family, through, I don't know, if you're part of organisations or sporting groups. You can be evangelising, you can be sharing the gospel by you actually being like Jesus. Are you the one that people look at and say, wow, they've always got a happy smile. They've always got a meal for people when they're down. They've always got something encouraging to say. Hang on to Jesus. Keep your eyes on the road. Yeah, and as you're driving, maybe this is a tip. Maybe you yourself have wondered why you're driving. It's a bit wonky. Keep your eyes on the road as to where you're going. And don't bother looking at each other as they leave church and think, oh my goodness. Focus on yourself and be that hands and feet to those around.